So what is the number that you're trying to hit to retire? I've been thinking about that recently, and I know in a lot of ways it's actually backwards. You should be looking at what your expenses are and then actually look at the income to replace those expenses. But when you're working and saving for most of your career, you're actually looking at it probably from the other side where, hey, if I'm putting money aside, I'm going to hit a certain number at the end. And I've been curious. So what is your number? Because I think my number keeps changing. And that's the challenge in a lot of ways of what am I getting to? What is that final number? And, when I look at Fidelity's goal here of different saving ages, this is their savings by age rule, and that's what I call it. At age 67, you should have 10 times your working salary. So, for example, and again, I like to include both. So maybe both you and your spouse, or if it's just you, just your numbers. But if both you and your spouse are making $100,000, you should have 10 times that. So you should have about $1 million. So is that the number? And the reason I bring this up is when I first started my career, and I actually brought up some numbers here. So I was making, when I first started my job many, many years ago, $27,500. I think that was my first starting salary in my first professional career. And if I had to guess, actually, I don't even know if I remember what number I was looking for. I just started putting money aside. And again, I was doing, I think 6% because that's what the company matched up to. And the reason I picked 6% was that's what they matched up to. And I figured if they were encouraging you to go up to 6%, that's all you needed to do. A little naive, obviously. But, if I had probably guessed, growing up back in the late 80s, early 90s, everybody said they needed $1 million. And I bet you that would have been my number. I'm pretty sure that would have been. Now, looking back again in 92, what $1 million is versus what it is today, it's a very different perspective. Here's kind of what I pulled up. So what is $1 million? So back in 92 or 93, $1 million today, it would be a little over 2.2, almost $2.3 million. So today, would I be saying, hey, that's the number I need? And, I thought, let me bring up, what is it going to be in 2035? And so here is another number, right? This is a little over, it's not that much of a difference, which is kind of somewhat shocking. It shows that it's $2.3 million. So is that the number I'm really striving for? And so it's one of those things that it just keeps changing. And I'm curious what your number is and how you figure it out. Again, maybe you're looking at it probably the other way, which is the way I've also been trying to figure it, is what are my expenses going to be? Now at 53, and I'm trying to take the house out, and maybe if I take what I'm saving, can I come back to a number that I really would like to live off of? And then looking at my SSA.gov numbers and trying to make that go forward. I have been doing that. But if you were trying to pick a number, how do you do it? Now, I've done a couple of little graphs here. Now, here is, again, that graph that I had, my starting salary at 27.5. And I think, again, when I was doing this back then, I didn't realize probably what I might make in the future, because over 45 working years, earning a 3% increase, you can see what that salary might turn into. There's no way I would have actually almost comprehended it at the age of 20, at 65, potentially making $104,000. Almost what, 4 times the amount that I was saving? I mean, that's pretty amazing. And then I did another one. What if it was the same 27.5, but at a 4% increase? Obviously some years we've had higher increases, other years we've had less. And some years I'm sure I've gotten 0 and even gone back in salary in some ways. But, if it was a consistent 4% over the 45 years, you can see here it's 160,000. Very different, 1% difference there. I mean, it's almost a 60,000 or it's a 55 something $1,000 change difference. And if you're saving that, you're going from 1 million to 1.6. It's about 500, something $1,000 difference there. So what are you saving to? And again, here I brought this graph up only from a perspective of it takes so long to start making a lot of money. And this is a graph that says, hey, if you were saving $10,000 a year, it's a 7% annual interest rate, and it would take, close to 8 years to hit the first $100,000. Now, I like this graph because it shows you what compounding does, because the second $100,000 only takes 5 years. The next $100,000 takes a little under 4 years. Really shows you, again, the growth the compounding starts to take. But the challenge that I have with this graph is somebody that, or maybe I'll use myself, when I was 20 or 21 or whatever it was, there's no way I could have even saved $10,000 a month or $10,000 a year. So I'm sure it took me a lot longer to make that first $100,000, even with the match, right? Even if I was doing 6%, my company was doing, let's say 3%, that's 9%. 9% on a 27, almost $28,000 salary isn't that much. I mean, yes, I was putting some away and everything counts, it all does help. But it took me probably a lot longer to make that first $100,000 to $200,000 to $300,000. But I've also learned a lot along the way, and today probably doing well. Well, I'm doing well over 15%, right? So that's what you need to then maybe make it up later on. But again, those early years really do help from a compounding standpoint. My next one here is, what might somebody today, and I actually put here somebody making $65,000 today, and I think this is somewhat realistic. I know some of my, some people coming out of college today at different careers, some making well more than this, some making less. So I just kind of picked a number that I thought was fairly conservative, fairly reasonable, that some people coming out of colleges today might make. And I put $65,000 at a 3% increase over the 45 years. And you can see here, they're going to be close to $250,000 when they retire. This is almost, $2.5 million that they need to save if you're still using the Fidelity by Saving rule. And what's interesting about this rule is it's probably, or it should be factoring in, some of the money that you're getting from Social Security. If Social Security expects to get that almost 20% decrease in payments, I wonder if this graph will need to be updated, because Social Security is not going to cover as much from a replacement value perspective. So I'm curious, in a few years, will they need to update this graph based on a 20% decrease in Social Security payments? But again, here's what somebody could be doing. Now, again, this would have been me in some ways, right? Oh, I made a mistake here. An annual increase of only 3%. I think that's actually a better perspective. But if I was making that 27.5 and putting away what I consider the minimum that you should be putting away when you're first starting out, and again, when I say you're first starting out, between 20 and 25, you should be putting in 10% away. If you miss that opportunity, you're going to need to increase it maybe to 15, 20, 25% to really make up the difference. But here's somebody that's making 27.5, 10% putting away from age 20 to 65, getting a 3% match. They'd have a little over $2 million, so almost 2.1. So great ways to show that you can save a considerable amount of money, especially if you're starting young and starting early. But I'm curious, has your number changed over the time period? Did you have one number and then, again, I would have said my number was, I'll use $500,000 at one point. And I'm sure when I hit that number, it now wasn't $500,000. It would have been probably double, right? $1 million, maybe even 1.1, right? Something like that. It definitely has changed over the time. And, number one, my salary has increased, or our family salaries have increased. The value of money, isn't the same as it used to be. And as soon as you hit that number that you thought you needed before, you immediately move to the next number. And I've easily done that, seeing that in my own self. And I'm curious if you're seeing that as well. So I hope you hit your number. I'll just say that. And if you like this video, hit subscribe and like it. Thank you.